After its sixth nuclear test on September 3rd, North Korea did another missile provocation, which is presumably intermediate-range ballistic missile. It went over Japan and is already second time in the past 17 days. It also flew 1,000 kilometers further than the previous one, which is showing its capacity of hitting Guam. A day after, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ordered the test of Hwasong-12. Korean Central News Agency said North Korea's goal is reaching equilibrium of military force with the United States. Amid heightened tensions on the peninsula, South Korean President Moon Jae-in and the U.S. President Donald Trump agreed to further strengthen the close cooperation between the two countries during the telephone conversation on September 17th. North Korea's provocation took place just before the 72nd session of U.N. General Assembly, which is known the Super Bowl of diplomacy. We'll delve into the imminent issues to be handled at the meeting, and it's the topic of our discussion this week on Peninsula 24. We have two experts in the studio. To my left, Jae-woo, Professor of Chinese Studies at Kyunghee University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And as always in the studio is Dr. Kim Chang-su. Dr. Kim, it's great to see you again this week.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so North Korea just fired a second missile over Japan, and many experts said the mobility of this Hwasong-12 has advanced, and this is going to be probably the most significant weapon of North Korea. So what feature do we have to focus on this time?
I think North Korea is getting an inch closer to perfecting their nuclear aspiration, and I think it is because well, for one state to get recognized as a nuclear power, you have to fulfill three elements. One is nuclear warheads, and two is carrier, and the third is launcher. And with the success of the IRBM, they call it success, with the IRBM, intermediate range ballistic missile, I think they're getting a step closer to perfecting their nuclear plan.
So what are the specific features of this time, the Hwasong-12?
Well, I can think of maybe a couple of features for this latest missile launch. First one being they extend the range of the missiles. They said they can cover now up to 3,700 kilometers, which will put the U.S. territory Guam within its range. So they really showed, instead of hitting the Guam, instead they showed the capability that we can shoot this range that far. Second one being is increase the maneuverability, because this time it was a shot from a tail, a transporter, erector, and launcher. So that means they have enjoying a greater maneuverability. And if you have ever estimated 200 launchers, tails, they can shoot from any place, any time. So they're enjoying a greater maneuverability. Third one being, I think, it is very close to what Dr. Ju just said. They have made a very important milestone in their nuclear and missile programs, because they are now much closer to that kind of skill. I think most important one is they don't want to lose this kind of momentum they have just gathered in terms of their possible negotiation with the United States, or even before their dialogue with the United States. So they don't want to lose the momentum this time.
I see. So it's even more threatening, and the words are so threatening as well. So North Korea said, and Kim Jong-un is going to complete its nuclear program, of course, and the final goal is reaching to the military equilibrium with the United States. And also he said that the latest missile, it is the first step of the military operation in the Pacific. So what does this all mean exactly?
So I would like to take a look at it from a different perspective. It could mean so, but just like you said. But the radius, the increase of radius to 3,700 kilometers, and you look at it from Pacific perspective, of course it could be a threat to the United States. But if you look at to the westward, that it could fly as far as to Xinjiang area in China, or it could be a threat to even Central Asia. So for North Korea and surrounding states, it could be well perceived as a really threatening situation for not only the United States, but also could be a challenge to China and Russia.
But it's not really aiming at that area or that region.
No, but the capability per se could be a great concern. I think that's why the concerned parties are really working hard to get the solution or get North Korea to the dialogue.
But all those bellicose words and arguments and statements, it sounds like they are ready to launch for the real war.
Yeah.
I think it's probably rhetorical because they don't have the capability to do that because United States is much more capable to strike. If there is a sign of imminent attack, United States might really consider striking these facility force. So North Korea knows that, and that kind of chance North Korea really strikes any part of the United States is very remote.
So it's at this point, it's more like rhetoric.
More rhetoric, and this is for domestic consumption, and they have many important days coming to celebrate. So this is a very big fodder for their domestic consumption and festivity because now they're talking about the unification in their own fashion, which is really worrying me again.
I see. Now let's listen to the views from the United States. We have connected an expert on the ground. Hello, Mr. Scott Schneider. It's really good to have you.
Sure, glad to be with you.
North Korea fired a second missile over Japan, although it didn't really threaten the United States or Guam directly, but it certainly raised a concern. How is the Washington accepting this news?
Obviously, any North Korean missile test of this sort attracts attention these days from U.S. government officials and media. Actually, it was Defense Secretary Mattis who warned very clearly that the U.S. wouldn't tolerate threats against the U.S. mainland, its allies, or Guam. And so I think that's the reason why the North Koreans are actually testing in a different direction. And if the North Koreans decide to send missiles in the direction of a U.S. territory or an allied territory, rather than toward the middle of the ocean, then I think that there's essentially a pledge of a massive response.
I see. But many have different opinions about the North Korea's capability. Actually, it may reach to Guam Island, but it is, in terms of accuracy, still in the low level. But nevertheless, it renewed the discussion of military action by the United States, and there was a discussion at the highest level of Trump administration at the White House. Well, so how likely for the United States to use the military force? I mean, if the Kim Jong-un continues to develop the nuclear warheads and the missiles, is it really likely for Trump administration to use the military action?
The administration, several officials have stated very clearly that we do have military capabilities that can be used in order to deal with the situation, but it's clearly not their first actions or option. And so I believe what the administration is really trying to do is to use a classic coercive diplomacy strategy, where essentially we're looking for diplomacy, but it's backed up by the threat of use of force.
Okay, facing the escalation of North Korea's threat, all the leaders will gather in New York to attend the General Assembly meeting. Do you think the heads of state will come up with an idea or solution to resolve the North Korean crisis?
I expect there to be a lot of discussion about North Korea, a lot of rhetoric. The UN Security Council has already acted to pass a new resolution. There will be additional coordination among national leaders, but ultimately, really, the main message of the UN meetings from a U.S. perspective is going to be that North Korea is isolated by the international community because of its actions, At the same time, the solution to this problem is not likely to be found only at the UN. It's also going to require involvement with North Korea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott Schneider, for sharing your insight with us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so President Moon Jae-in, he embarked on his 5-day visit to New York to attend a General Assembly meeting in UN, and he's also going to deliver keynote speech and regarding North Korean nuclear program and South Korean foreign policy, and possibly, ask for the help and cooperation from the international community. So, what kind of strategy does he need and does he have?
I think he should get a valuable lesson from his Berlin address, that he has to be really on the same page with others, because I think there was a controversial call in Korean society when a couple of days ago he came out with this idea of offering humanitarian aid to North Korea of 8 million Korean won.
$1 million US.
$1 billion US worth of goods and aid. And I think that was a very controversial call, and I think he might have get some sense of how the international community really views on that particular offer.
But it was actually confirmed by the UN, right? I mean, it's just helping the kids and also the pregnant women, so it's really humanitarian aid.
Yes.
So what matters is a political significance, because even though we are going to provide some aid on a purely humanitarian basis, but I think the timing of his speech and the context under which he's made that kind of speech is very controversial. So I think one of the lessons, as you point out, he learned a lesson, very valuable lesson to us, even though he has a very high moral standard, moral imperative, but he has also considered the realistic constraints, because we have to be on the same page, United States and South Korea. So for this time, at least a short time being, we have to be on the same page. We have to concentrate on how we are going to effectively deter and contain North Korean threats, rather than providing an aid to North Korea, which is something we can discuss later on.
So what actually do you expect in his speech?
I think he's going to deliver a little bit subdued speech this time, because he made a kind of peace proposal already twice in Berlin and in Washington, D.C. And there was also many critical criticism by South Korean media and some experts. So I think this is what he has been spoken about. I'm going to serve all those political opinion expert views so that I can make a much more compromise in terms of dealing our speech to the outside world. So this time I think his tactics will be a little bit different from the past. I think he's more focusing on how to manage the crisis on the Korean Peninsula, and ultimately how we're going to deal with North Korean nuclear missile threats in a more subdued tone, focusing on this North Korean issue rather than so many other things that might distract our attention.
I see. But the interesting part is that we're going to miss two important key players, Russian President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping, and neither of them is coming to the meeting.
That's right.
Some experts actually say that it's totally meaningless without these two key players, because these are closest ally of North Korea. And China kept refusing to play the further role to rein North Korea from its further provocation. And I think China is actually annoyed, because I heard that they are saying that just stop saying that China is, the responsibility theory. So is there anything that we can expect from China and Russia? Or we're just dreaming?
Dreaming is good, because one day if you keep dreaming, you're going to achieve or realize your dream. So dreaming is not that bad. But it is not uncommon that, all the top leaders of the world, they don't attend the United Nations General Assembly, especially, for Xi Jinping this year. With this, there's going to be a leadership change in China.
October.
That's right. So he's very much preoccupied with that. But I don't know about Putin. But, yes, indeed, with their absence, I don't think United Nations Assembly, General Assembly's outcome is going to matter that much. But at the same time, just like Dr. Kim pointed out, I think this time we could contribute something by drawing some consensus or building some consensus within the General Assembly and tell the world that how security situation is very concerning us as well as neighboring states. And with the Chinese responsibility, I'd like to add a comment that China keeps saying that they're not the direct responsible state of the whole situation. But you look at the history of China and North Korea as well as USSR back in the Cold War period. They were the one actually gave a sense of threat to North Korea with their nuclear arsenals. And when the ties with China or the Soviet Union wasn't that good for North Korea, they felt threatened by the nuclear arsenal with the Soviet Union in Vladivostok and China in the northeast region. So they cannot be free from our criticism of their responsibility, but unfortunately, no one has come to this idea or term with China.
Well, we cannot really expect anything for a while because he's too busy.
Yes, that's right.
What do you think, Dr. Kim?
Beijing and Moscow made a decision that their leaders will not attend this UNGA this time. So I think if you look at the brighter side to it, which means their absence in this UNGA, then we can talk more closely with our allies, United States, Japan, and some other countries like Australia and Germany, who offered to intervene in this case. So I think President Moon may actually have much more freedom to speak much in a friendly manner with all these allies, rather than with China's leader, Russian leaders intercepting, and maybe otherwise they're going to have a lot of controversy, maybe a lot of fire and anger sometimes. So I think without Chinese and Russian presence at UNGA this time, it may turn out to be a better on concentrating our #1 priority issue, which is U.S. North Korea's nuclear and missile issue.
So it's actually better without them.
I think so. I want to look at the brighter side to it rather than, because we cannot just there's no way returning back to this kind of decision they made.
Okay, so it's good not to have them, but that's probably why we need further strengthened cooperation with our allies and the neighboring countries. And President Moon Jae-in, U.S. President Donald Trump, and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, they were going to hold a Trilateral summit in New York for this visit. Over the phone conversation, President Moon talked to Prime Minister Abe that we are considering the continuation of humanitarian aid to North Korea. And Prime Minister Abe didn't really explicitly said no, but he was implicitly saying no by saying, well, we have to be cautious about the timing. So there's some, as we said, we're not really in the same chapter. So isn't it like in a fissure that we are seeing, or is it still can expect cooperation?
I want to look at this from this angle because President Moon already talked over the phone with Abe about the issue that you just raised. I think at this time at the UNGA, we can focus it on some other issues which is more imminent to us, more needs our desperate responses to these North Korean threats. So maybe I think President Moon is wise enough to skip this issue because he doesn't have to repeat this issue with Mr. Abe because there are some other pressing issues between our two countries. So I think rather than the South Korea-U.S. or South Korea-Japan relationship, we're going to talk about more trilateral security cooperation, meaning the United States, South Korea, and Japan, over how we are going to cope with this imminent threat from North Korea. I think this time it will be more on the security, defense, and military side, rather than just diplomatic or humanitarian issues. This is, situation is that urgent, I think.
So what do you expect? Do you expect President Moon is going to back up from his statement?
I think he should.
You think he should?
Yes, he should. He should. Just like we've all discussed, I think this is a right moment and good opportunity for South Korea to build consensus within the UNGA with the absence of Russia and China. I think we could play a significant role in that perspective. Plus, at the same time, just like Dr. Kim pointed out, I think information sharing should be really well discussed and in depth among the trilateral leaders, because over the past month and a half, it seems like despite the fact that we have information sharing agreement with Japan, it doesn't seem like that agreement has gone into effect yet. We are not getting sufficient information from our allies or Japan. So, you know, we're just caught off guard whenever there's a missile provocation from North Korea. And I think for our better defense, I think information sharing mechanism or, you know, network should be discussed in depth at this juncture.
Well, but what about with the United States? There are some criticisms that our President Moon is not really get along very well with the President Trump because there's some different ideas, different opinions coming up, and the White House sometimes is not really happy with the President Moon's statement and Blue House statement. For example, like military talk didn't really happen, but
that's right.
So, do you think we are in sort of a, you know, worrisome situation, or is it still going to be okay?
I think it'll be okay. I don't think many leaders get along well with Donald Trump.
So we're not the only one.
Yes, we're not the only one. But over the after their respective inauguration, I think President Moon have talked to Donald Trump on the phone for 5 times, and they already met twice, and this would be the 3rd encounter. And I think they know what they're concerned with, what their focus of interest is, and I think they're really conscious of their respective positions. So I think probably this time their talk will go better. Yes.
But still, I remember that after the 6th nuclear test, it was Prime Minister Abe that President Trump called first, not our president. It's the issue in our peninsula.
There must be reasons behind, because we don't have a specific why they did it and why they didn't do it. But this is kind of all kind of speculation. But there must be good reasons why behind. It was Mr. First Abe who made the first phone call to Donald Trump rather than Moon Jae-in. So I don't want to speculate what went wrong or what went good. But there must be reasons. But after all, Mr. Moon and Mr. Donald actually had the final telephone call, and they're waiting for the UNG meeting anyway. So we have a much broader opportunity and good venue to discuss further details instead of focusing, because there was seeming like a disconnect between the two leaders, because Mr. Trump made this and Mr. Moon responded in another way. But I think we should be on the same page, and when on the next encounter between the two leaders, they will talk about more focused manner on North Korean threats.
Well, come to think of it, Mr. Trump is not always in the same chapter with his own steps, so maybe it's not really a very concerning thing. So lastly, can you briefly summarize your idea about this meeting and expectations?
Because I think the 6th nuclear test by North Korea was the most serious one, and this is a real game changer in any respect. So now South Koreans' public opinion has shown difference to the U.S. leadership, U.S. decision, and U.S. policy for South Korea, and also we are going to have a little bit different demand for our President Moon. I think this is a very important momentum for South Korea, that we should really focus on our national security rather than unification, which is an ultimate long-term goal. So I think we've gone through seen ups and downs in our relations with the United States, but I think in this process, both the United States and South Korea learned a very good, important lesson that we are facing a real threat from North Korea. The number one priority for both of us should be how we're going to deter, and if there's a need be, how we're going to prevent that from happening. I think this is becoming a kind of national consensus in South Korea, which is very good from my own perspective.
I think this time, I don't want to give too much meaning to the United Nations General Assembly meeting or possible outcome of the General Assembly, but I'd rather probably give more meanings to the Trilateral Summit. And I think this time we have to prove that the solidarity of the trilateral relationship and the alliance, because the threat has been increasing from North Korea. And I think it's time for us to show and high respect to the solidarity of the alliance. And I think that would be really critical. After confirming our solidarity, then I think the bilateral relationship between Korea and Japan, just like you pointed out, I've been now calling toward talking to President Moon. I don't think that kind of event shouldn't happen in the future.
I see. Well, thank you, Dr. Choo and Dr. Kim, for sharing your insights with us today. And
My pleasure.
thank you all for staying with us. We'll be back next week with the hottest issues surrounding the Korean Peninsula. If you want to find out what's happening in and around the Korean Peninsula, tune into Peninsula 24. Thanks for watching.